Hi everyone, my name is Steph. Welcome back to the Novelty Corner. Today we are going to be talking about bookshelf 9 on my bookshelf tour. So if you have not been following along with the series, I will leave a link to the playlist on the screen and in the description down below, so you are most welcome to check that out. I won't go through the whole spiel. I'm going through my bookshelf shelf by shelf. We're up to bookshelf 9. We are going to have an overview of the shelf, which is just a really quick look at what it looks like. I can't film in front of the shelves because of the positioning of where they are, but I do have all the books here beside me and I'm going to go through them as soon as the overview is done. Here we are at bookshelf 9. This is my P2R shelf, although really it's just letter P to the start of my Matthew Reilly collection. All right, there is not a huge variation in authors on this shelf. In fact, I think there may only be 3 or 4, but there are a lot of books. 24 of them to be exact. First up, I have some Michael Pryor books. Michael Pryor is an Australian young adult author. He is absolutely fantastic. He's actually fairly local to where I am, and I've met him many times over the last few years at various events, and he's a very funny guy. I have 3 of his books currently. The first one, and probably the oldest one that I own, is Blackout, which is a young adult dystopian type book. I must have met him sometime before I started my booktube journey because this is signed and personalized to me, so it must have been sometime in high school, but I'd totally forgotten about it until I started rereading this book a little while back. Then I have his Gap Year in Ghost Town series, which is super fun. This is young adult horror. It is ghosts set in Melbourne, and it is absolutely delightful. The first one is Gap Year in Ghost Town, and this is the story of Anton, who has been convinced by his father to take a gap year instead of going straight off to university after high school to try out the family business, which is ghost hunting and putting ghosts to rest. And then he comes across Rani, who has come over from the UK, and they have very different ghost hunting styles, and they clash, but there is a mystery to be solved and they have to work together. The second book is Graveyard Shift in Ghost Town, and it picks up right where the first book left off, and it is utterly delightful. There is a huge amount of humour. This is very representative of Melbourne. If you want to read a good book that really goes into Melbourne life, where I live, these are the books to do it, even though they are young adult and they have ghosts. They're great. The next author on my shelf is Philip Pullman. I do have a copy of The Book of Dust by Philip Pullman. This was one of his most recent releases and is the prequel to the His Dark Materials series. I didn't enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed the His Dark Materials series, but I'll explain why in a moment. But it was still a really interesting read, although it is a brick and it did take me a while. The reason I probably had so much difficulty with The Book of Dust is because I absolutely adore the His Dark Materials series. I just love how thought-provoking they are. They are young adult fantasy, sort of urban fantasy / fantasy. There are real fantasy elements in here, but there's also this element of Earth-likeness to it. So the first book is Northern Lights. Then you have The Subtle Knife, and then you have The Amber Spyglass. These books are really well known. They're really well loved. I absolutely adore them. The first time that I read them, I read all 3 books in one weekend because I could not stop myself from reading the next book. I don't know what happened to my original copies. I did have to rebuy these a little while ago, and I'm so glad that I did because they're beautiful editions and this has a really special place in my heart. I don't read a huge ton of fantasy anymore, but I would reread these in a heartbeat. Then we come to my Matthew Reilly collection, and this is 2/3 of my Matthew Reilly collection, so you'll see the rest of them in the next bookshelf tour. I've tried to think about the best way to go about this because by filming it this way, I have broken up series in some way, so we're going to go through this in a slightly different order than I would normally do with an author. You're also going to notice that I do actually have multiples of books. There are a couple of books I actually have 3 copies of. A little bit of history about my relationship with Matthew Reilly books. I moved schools in year 9. I'd previously not been a huge reader. I'd read a few things, and I started reading Jurassic Park and the Lost World by Michael Crichton in year 8, and that got me back into reading. But when I moved to my new school, I didn't really know anyone, so I spent a lot of time in the library, as you do. Sometime in year 9, I stumbled across Matthew Reilly. Now, I'm not entirely sure why Matthew Reilly was shelved in an all-girls school library, but he was, and I'm thankful for it because that essentially started this lifelong need to collect his books, even when I, as an adult, recognize the problematic elements in his writing. I still can't help myself and I will continue to read his books. If that makes me a bad person, I'm sorry, but it's just true. The first couple of books from Matthew Reilly that I'm going to show to you are some of the original books that I purchased, so they're some of the oldest ones that I own. There is Ice Station, which is my all-time favourite book and is the one that basically sent me on a Matthew Reilly spiral. This is a book set in Antarctica where things go horribly wrong for a bunch of Marines who get stranded there, and it is very violent, gory, bloody, and I delight in it. There is also Temple, which is along similar lines to Ice Station, except we are now in the jungles of Peru and things go bad there too. Basically the premise for any of Matthew Reilly's books are that things go bad very quickly, and then you're basically on a roller coaster ride that does not stop until the end of the book. Contest was his first book published. This is not my original copy of Contest, but it is the oldest one that I own, and this one is basically the Hunger Games for adults set in the New York State Library with aliens. And then there's also this little novella, which is Hell Island, which is part of the Scarecrow series. This book I actually got free because it was part of a promotional thing that was happening in Australia back at that time, where if you purchased a certain value of books, I think you received a free book, and the year that this happened, this was a Matthew Reilly book. Next, I'm going to go through the standalone Matthew Reilly books that I have. There is The Secret Runners of New York, which was his first YA release. There is Hovercar Racer, which is an adorable book. It is a middle grade story, and it follows Jason Chaser, who dreams of becoming a hovercar racer and participating in the global races for it. It's essentially Matthew Reilly's love story to pod racing from Star Wars, but it was adorable, and this was originally released free in parts online, and I remember collecting all of them and making my dad collect them when I went off on camp because I was terrified I was going to miss the next part, and then he released it as an actual book, which I also purchased. There is Troll Island, which is a bit of a fantasy novella. There is The Tournament. It is a historical fiction story about a chess match between the King of the Ottoman Empire and the Kings of Europe. I haven't reread that one in a long time, so that may be due for a reread. We also have The Great Zoo of China, which is Jurassic Park with dragons. Interestingly enough, I didn't realize this when I purchased this book because I purchased it online. It did come signed, so I think that's the only Matthew Reilly book that I have signed. The next two books are part of the Scarecrow series, so this is where I am definitely out of order. So Ice Station is the first book in that series, and then because I started reading those after their initial publication, I don't actually have those in the full-size hardcovers, but I did start collecting from book 3, I think, the hardcovers. So that one is Scarecrow, which is honestly, of all the Matthew Reilly books, the book that shall not be named, and anyone who has read the series will know why, because Matthew Reilly is not afraid to kill off characters, but he did something in here that he probably should not have done. Anyone who's read the book, you'll know exactly what it is. And then the fourth Scarecrow book is Scarecrow and the Army of Thieves, and again, I actually can't really remember this book because after Scarecrow I still read the series, but I was really cranky. Maybe now as a proper adult I should reread them and be a little bit more objective. And then last but not least, we have the Jack West Jr. series. This is his current ongoing series. I believe there is one more book left. The first book is 7 Ancient Wonders. This is about Jack West Jr. and he's former SAS, but he's also a historian and an archaeologist. And basically these are like treasure hunts, really, for power, and lots of things happen. So 7 Ancient Wonders is the first book. Then you have the 6 Sacred Stones, the 5 Greatest Warriors, the 4 Legendary Kingdoms, the 3 Secret Cities, and the 2 Lost Mountains, which you will have heard me talk about recently. So that is everything. That is it on bookshelf 9. In the comments below, feel free to let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning to. Do you enjoy these authors? Do you not? I would love to talk to you about them down below. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Bye.